Hello, welcome to the F-14 Tomcat Radio Show podcast, straight out of Grumman, Calveron, where all 712 Tomcats were built. I'm the show's producer. My name's Lorenzo. We have an awesome show tonight, as usual, and we're doing a mini-series here on books and authors with the F-14 Tomcat, and we have a special guest. But before we do that, let's get our host introduced, and that's Lieutenant Commander Eric Mcmullen, call sign SYHYN, from the Tomcat as a Fighter Squadron 31, flying the F-14D Super Tomcat. Not bad, right?
Hey, man, I was glad to do it.
Sitting in the front seat, flipping switches and pressing buttons, and look at that cool light just turned on outside. And if he could only find that ICS panel with that guy yelling at him in the headset, he could just lower that volume down out there. And it's your show's producer. I'm glad to be with you guys tonight. It's been, about 5 years since I've hosted anything fleet-wise with you guys. And SYHYN, it started with us back then, and it's cool to see you again on the screen.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
We have an amazing guest tonight. His background is just mind-blowing, amazing, his achievements. And he's not just an author of an amazing book that we'll get to momentarily, but his name is Lou Benoit, and was a crew chief at Beale Air Force Base with the SR-71 Blackbird. He graduated the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1979, and he flew F-16s out of Luke. He's done a lot of amazing things in his career, and we're going to hear about him tonight, including a book he wrote. And SYHYN, why don't you take that over?
Awesome. Well, Lou, it is great to have you. And I understand your call sign is balls. So I will refer to you by your call sign as much as possible. Okay. We're aviators. That's what we do. So welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, SYHYN. And thanks, Lorenzo, for having me on. I appreciate you.
That's awesome, Lou. Thank you.
So, Lou, we're going to cover a little bit of your history because it's definitely pertinent to the discussion here. First of all, I'm going to hold up this book, and this is the reason we're talking. We're going to have a better picture of it later. But I have this book that you produce. It's a short volume, but man, it is packed with information, and no one does this kind of information gathering unless they absolutely love the subject. The amount of data in there is truly unbelievable, and really can't be found anywhere else. So let's talk a little bit about why aviation for you to begin with, and then we'll get a little bit into what your experiences with aviation that kind of gave you some depth of knowledge to be able to kind of produce a work like this. So why were you interested in aviation in the first place?
You know, as a kid, I grew up part of my life in Santa Cruz in California, right there on the ocean. And I was playing out in the yard one day. I really wanted to be a scuba diver. I just thought, because in the newspaper every day had a story about a scuba diver doing something or finding something or rescuing somebody, or they're rescuing scuba divers. And I'm out in the yard in this little, it was a Piper Cherokee, red and white. And we lived kind of up on this hill, and I'm sitting out there in the yard, and this Cherokee comes zipping up over our house. I mean, really low. And then he dipped down on the other side of the hill and he was gone. I thought, man, that was pretty neat. And I thought, well, I hope he comes back. Sure enough, he came back, and he goes zipping by even lower. And I can now see the guy sitting in the cockpit, has aviator sunglasses on, a headset, and a baseball cap. And boom, he's gone on the other side, and that was it. And I thought, that looks really cool. To heck with being a scuba diver. I think I want to fly airplanes.
Yeah, nice.
So I walked in the house. I knew my dad had a stack of airplane magazines, and I pulled up, and I'll show it to you. This isn't the exact magazine or the one that my dad had, but it's a flying magazine from May of 1969.
Whoa,
and up at the top, up in here, you can see there's an F-111.
Yeah.
Well, the first article I read is I'm going to look at the F-111, and I read this article, and I was just amazed at this airplane. Variable geometry, the TF-30s, an escape capsule, could carry bombs. The Navy was going to get it as they called it the Fleet Air Defense Fighter. And I thought, man, what an amazing airplane. So push that aside. I never let go of being, or the desire of being a pilot, but I did want to be a fighter pilot. My dad happened to be a flight surgeon in the Air Force, so I saw pictures of him, in a flight suit, sitting next to F-106s and B-52s and things like that. And I thought, man, that's got to be the coolest thing to be in the Air Force. So that's kind of where I got my vision to be a pilot and join the Air Force eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. And as we've covered in some previous episodes that we were just talking about a minute ago, going up around aviation, or at least around people who are involved in aviation, it's kind of a natural bleed. Both of my sons are similarly enthralled by it.
Sure, sure. You know, it was like 8 years old, I think it was, and you never let go of that dream. I mean, I guess you have to have that dream, and it has to stay with you to get there. You
Yeah,
just can't let it go, right?
yeah. So then you went on through school
Yep.
and joined the Air Force, enlisted, right?
Right. Yeah. So I was in 1979. I graduated high school, and I didn't have the grades to get into college. I'd applied for the Air Force Academy, and there was no way. They kind of laughed at me. They just said, "Try again." So I joined the Air Force because I found out from a recruiter that an enlisted guy could actually get himself into the Air Force Academy if you made the grade. So I started studying, applied again, got turned down again from the Air Force Academy. And then finally, on my third attempt out there at Beale Air Force Base, I finally made it. But I had to go to the Academy Prep School, which is 8 months long. And they basically put you through high school math, English, and chemistry. And then you go on to the Academy. So that's how I got to the Academy. Getting through the Academy was another story.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, the school in Central Colorado is a thing unto itself. But you, as I understand it, did some pretty cool stuff as an enlisted guy too before going to the Academy.
Yes. Yeah, I was a crew chief. I made it to crew chief on the KC-135, and it was the Q model, which is the one that has special fuel tanks or separate fuel tanks for the fuel for the SR-71.
The JP-8, right?
JP-7. It was a JP-8. Yeah,
JP-7. JP-7.
Yeah, JP-7. Yeah. JP-8 came out later in the Air Force, but yeah, JP-7. So you had to keep them separate. You couldn't get a mixture of JP-4 and JP-7 because the SR-71 would have problems with it in flight. So that was kind of neat. So as a crew chief, I get to go flying with the tanker, and I saw the SR-71 refuel multiple times at night, daytime, chase it around the world. That was a lot of fun. It was a great job.
That is a pretty neat perspective that honestly, probably fewer people than actually flew the Tomcat could say.
Right.
They've seen a SR-71 nose on in flight.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing to see. Yeah, it is an incredible airplane to look at. Yeah.
Very cool. So you were able to go to the Academy, like I said, as everyone's schooling is, college schooling is, no one really has an easy time in college. And the Air Force Academy was no better. But you went went to flight school and you're flying.
Yeah, I graduated in 1986 and then went off to Del Rio in Laughlin Air Force Base down there on the U.S. Texas Mexico border, right on the border town. And started pilot training a month after graduation. And that was my dream come true. And I made a vow, I am not going to wash out of this place. I'm going to go for it. I'm going all in. And unfortunately, at the time, they had too many pilots in the Air Force, so they were washing pilots out of pilot training for minor flying infractions type of thing. So our class started with 60 students, and we finished with about 28.
Whoa.
So more than half of the class washed out of pilot training. Yeah. So to make it through, that was a huge achievement. And at that point, you're just glad to be finished.
Winging at about 87, right?
Yeah, 87. Yeah.
I'm surprised. I mean, like that seemed to be, there was the whole, Reagan buildup and all that kind of stuff. I'm surprised.
Yeah. It was just the ebb and flows of pilot training. One year they have too many pilots, the next year they don't have enough, and it just kept going back and forth.
Gotcha.
So the whole time I was there, in fact, we had another drawdown right near the time Desert Storm was finishing up. In fact, they were giving people the opportunity in pilot training or having recently graduated, just get out of the Air Force. And asking pilots that were instructors there, if you want, you can get out of the Air Force. We'll pay you some money to just leave, go. So a lot of people left, students left. So it was kind of an interesting time. And then they stopped giving away pilot slots. Like I was supposed to go to a fighter, and at the time they were only offering KC-135s or C-130s. And I thought, well, hey, whatever, I'll go back to the KC-135 and be kind of a roundabout way to get back there and be a pilot in the thing. But fortunately for me, an F-16 dropped right when I was ready to go, and I got my F-16. So that's how it happened.
Gotcha. Okay. So you just basically sat around until your patience is a virtue thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we certainly don't mean to disparage those who give us gas and those who move our
Oh yeah,
stuff
yeah,
around.
yeah.
It is a very necessary thing.
Oh yeah,
But for those of us who have flown point-nose aircraft, it's a blessing. And so,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you fall in love with whatever plane you end up flying.
Imagine me.
Nobody usually complains.
Imagine me. I can't say anything. I rode my bicycle at Grumman and I dated a girl's dad that worked on the assembly line.
there you go.
Yeah.
And
Refueling? Yes.
yeah, and plenty of our maintainers would have given their left appendage of some description.
I bet.
To be able to go flying with us or even flying in anything. They were
Oh yeah, yeah.
excited to go on the cod, and that's
Yeah.
get a trap or a cat shot on the cod.
Sure.
So I think we are very fortunate, and so I appreciate your perspective that even if I was supposed to get a fighter slot. I mean, I had the same sort of story as you. If you can go back to episode 1 of all this, you'll hear it too.
Sure.
But, I thought I was going to go fly S3s or Prowlers, and very happy that I didn't have to. Well,
Oh yeah.
I got to do something else, I should say. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I totally get that. So okay, before we lose someone here, and we're like, wait a second, I thought this was supposed to be a Tomcat show.
Right. Exactly. I know. Yeah.
We need to. I want to connect a little bit here. So I want to draw a couple lines. One, first of all, as you showed in that magazine, F-111 was a hot thing in the late '60s.
Yep. Sure was.
The DoD really thought that that was going to be the answer to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And then they tried to bring it out and do carrier suitability, and they're like, "What? This ain't going to happen."
Right.
And honestly, it didn't ever really do what the Air Force exactly wanted it to do either, is my understanding. It did fill some pretty cool rules, including the aardvark, the Raven, EF-111.
Yeah, the EF-111. Right. Another association with Grumman.
Yeah, and honestly, it did some pretty neat stuff right up through the time I was flying as well.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
there's some beating connections, and of course, anyone who knows anything about the Tomcat program knows that that's kind of where the Tomcat was born out of.
Right.
Variable geometry, and of course, some of the weapon systems transferred over. So that's a good thing. And then also, like you said, with your connection on the SYHYN program, certainly there are parts of that development that ended up becoming part of the Tomcats
Sure.
lineage, you might say.
Absolutely. Titanium.
So you went off. So we'll put a pin on that and come back to it.
Okay. Yeah.
You went off and did a pretty awesome career in the Air Force. Got to fly fighters and move around some stuff, and move around some places and do some different things. And tell us kind of just a little summary of how that happened. Oh, actually, before I do, tell us how you got your call sign.
Okay. Well, there's about 3 different stories for it, and one I won't say on the radio network.
Sure.
I'll share it with you guys, but I'll give you the family-friendly version. Golf is not my game, so I am. If you want to see who the world's worst golfer is, you're looking at him. I gave it up. It's just I have nothing but problems with golfing. So yeah, it's not my sport. And so anyway, balls is a story, and several tournaments at the bases that I've been to with golfing was push my name, balls.
Yeah, that's fair. And you've probably heard this little joke we have in the Navy when we're talking about how the Air Force always seems to have more money than the Navy. We're always building very expensive ships, and then the Air Force will build a base, and they'll make the grounds really nice, and they'll make sure the golf course is in. They're like, oh wait, we've got to build runways.
Yeah.
So it is definitely part of the Navy too, honestly. Part of the officer's job in different places is playing golf. It becomes part of who you are.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So
I avoided the golf games. I said I'll bow. I'll serve drinks, and I'll cook steaks or whatever. But I just stay away from the game.
There you go. Be the cart driver.
Yeah, right.
All right. So tell me a little summary of what you did career-wise that got you. I had heard some of the places, like you were up in Alaska and some of that stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I started off in the F-16 in 90, flying my RTU out there at MacDill, and finished that. That's a 6-month course, and probably the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life to that point. It's a very, very difficult school. You're working 12 to 16 hours a day studying, And every day you would have a simulator. There'd be an academic class, maybe an academic test, and you would fly, and then the debrief. So you had 12-hour days, 5 days a week, and then you had weekends off. But I usually used my weekends to get ahead in academics and then review and prepare for tests and things like that were coming up. So you finish that 7 months later, you're qualified as a wingman, and then you go to your first operational assignment. I made a stop at Luke here in Phoenix, and you went through the Lantern course. So learning how to fly, train following radar, use the targeting pod, that kind of stuff, and then go up to Hill. Well, they stopped me en route, went to Hill, went through my basic qualification there as a wingman, then went back to Luke again to top off on the Lantern system because we'd lost a couple airplanes on Lantern missions. You know, guys didn't fly it properly on the attack profile and crashed. So after that, there's bigger interest in the Air Force for safety.
And Lantern was pretty new at that point, right?
Yes. Still very new. Yeah. In fact, I think they would have deployed to Desert Storm doing terrain following radar with the F-16, but they knocked it off and made them go in medium altitude. So most of Desert Storm, the F-16s flew nothing but medium altitude attacks. After that, became a instructor pilot there, flying and teaching Lantern, and then moved up to Alaska because we had a mishap there. Actually, they lost 2 airplanes up there in Alaska before I got there. Most of them were G-loss of consciousness. Yeah. And the squadron was in a bit of a disarray, losing 2 pilots, and then they had not done very well in one of the inspections. So I had to go up there and kind of set up the Stand-Eval office and became a flight commander and assistant operations.
Insert here a little bit for people who might not be listening. Stand-Eval, that's standardizations and evaluations. Yeah. So essentially the check pilot part of it, you know, checking guys out. They have 2 check rides and simulators a year. So it's a contact check, which is the basic mission, like a mission check. And then they have an instrument check every year. And then 2 simulators, check rides a year. So that's kind of the check ride profile up there. So, I did that. And then from there, finished up there in 98. And I had a choice of going remote to Korea for a year or going to Luke and be an instructor down there. I said, hey, Phoenix or Korea? So I chose to do the Phoenix assignment. And because I was getting pretty close to getting out anyway, I thought at the time. And so I chose to go to Luke and straight into their instructor class and started teaching Lantern there at the schoolhouse. And then we started changing missions. We started the terrain following radar portion of the F-16 mission was going away, and we're taking on night vision goggles. So we're teaching Lantern, medium altitude use of the targeting pod, also using night vision goggles and all the different tactics. And then we started moving into FAC, forward air control with the F-16. So that's another course we were teaching there at the schoolhouse. So gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's a pretty neat diversity of flying experience you have. It's one aircraft. I mean,
very capable of it.
But very real. I mean, you know, when you look at the F-16, it was a little. Let's see, if I'm doing math right here, it was about 10 years into its career when you started flying it, roughly-ish.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe 10 or 12, like something.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. I started in 90, and the first F-16s, I think, were 76 time frame.
Oh, that early. Okay, I was thinking.
I think so.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, so it was an established plane, but still a pretty hot plane. I mean, certainly we in the Tomcat community, we had our Top Gun. You guys had Iron Eagle, which was in that same. A little before,
right?
Chuckle, what are you doing?
Yeah. We won't mention that one.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to make it sound all good. I mean, you know, what's his name? Brent Masters or Brent, whatever his name is.
Yeah, it was like.
Yeah, I don't see him going in and stealing an airplane in a real squadron. That's not really.
No.
Well, he didn't steal it. Chappie gave it to him. No, Chappie was on a maintenance hop. He was a maintenance mechanic pilot for the Air Force. And, he took Doug for a ride. And your movie's got some issues, man. We got to talk about that after the show.
but no, in terms of mission diversity, we saw the same thing happen in the Tomcat community over the course of By the time I got to the jet, it was truly what Grumman had envisioned it being when they started designing and putting it to paper, and seeing the F-16 go through that life cycle development as well, uh,
Yes.
as both the technology improved, but also as the mission set evolved and the necessity of what you guys were doing. I remember, oh hey, there we are.
Yep.
Hey, look at
There
that.
you go. GE Motors.
In a second, is that's one? That's Sticks.
Triple
Sticks.
sticks, Christine.
That's Christine. I love that jet. Yes, I've got, I don't know, 20 or so flights in that jet, something like that. Anyway, I just think it's really neat to see how that progresses over the course of a career. You look at the F4. The F4 did change some over its span. You look at other naval aircraft, the F8, the A7, whatever things like that. They were pretty much did what they were designed to do their entire career, and that's it. They didn't really um, develop such a
Evolve.
evolve in a way, but I would say mature even to what they weren't starting out as, which very much the F-16 as an aircraft, operational aircraft, is still maturing. Tomcat is still would have still been maturing if we were still flying it, but I felt very very thankful to be able to fly the Tomcat in the era I did because the mission set was pretty full.
Yep.
And it was pretty neat to be able to see all the different things coming together, especially in the D model that I flew. So you mentioned a couple things there that probably I'm guessing I'm going to ask another question about how you kind of got interested in the Tomcat, but you mentioned some things there that specifically in this book, I'm guessing kind of lended some better insight to how things were happening. I read in your intro how I think the word you used was how do you say disheartening? No, that wasn't. I gotta find the right word. That when you looked at all the different things, haunting. That was the word you used.
Haunting. Yeah.
But the stories were haunting, and
Yeah.
so here you were. That's kind of as you were talking about at the time I was going up to Eelson, that there was a couple of these GLOC incidences, and so they were perfectly fine aircraft that had the 1.0 dirt kill PK because the person sitting inside was no longer operational.
Right.
And we had some of those for sure in the Tomcat as well. And I suspect that's the kind of things you're talking about when you say haunting. You had personal experience, maybe not of that. Obviously, you're sitting with us thankfully today, but in terms of your own career, you had definite insight to what that kind of thing looks like as things go out of hand, as we don't expect it to.
Right.
Sometimes. So tell me, you mentioned in here that this is published in 23. I guess this is the first time this was kind of off the shelf, off the presses, and you've got a couple other things a couple other publications that you'd also written. One specifically about the F-111.
Yes.
Got this one about the Tomcats. We're going to talk about that. And so the Iranian Tomcats. We're going to talk about that in a future session with us. But then you've also got the one about the A1. So yeah, they're certainly venerable aircraft, but you did say at the beginning of your introduction that you've never thought that anything was a sexier aircraft than the Tomcat. So
Yes.
where did that come from? Where did your first introduction come from? And
I my dad took me to an air show. I grew up kind of in Canada most of my life. We moved up there shortly after I made the decision to be a pilot there. In 1968, we moved to Canada, and they had what's called the Abbotsford Air Show. It's an international air show now. I'm not sure after COVID if it's still going on, but we went over there probably in 1976 or so to the air show, and there was a Tomcat sitting on the ramp. And I made a model of one, knew it had Phoenix missiles, just thought it was the cat's meow, just a great looking aircraft compared to, say, the F4. The F4 was the be all end all in Vietnam, but now you got this Tomcat, the first fourth gen fighter with this radar that can, track 24 targets, shoot something out there about 100 miles out. And with the Phoenix missile, a missile that could go both semi-active and active in its kill zone. And I thought, man, what an airplane. And it sounded great when it taxied in, looked great when it taxied in. I mean, you just sat there and I would stand there and my shirt's wet from drool, not sweat, drool.
You're like,
just going, what an airplane to fly. Yeah, what an airplane to fly. So, you know, that's kind of where I really started to enjoy watching the career of the F-14.
Well,
and after that, though, you go off, and in the Air Force, I had an opportunity. You know, the commander comes to me and goes, hey, you're good at math and problem solving. We're sending you to crash investigation school. So off I went to California and went through I think it's a 3-week-long crash investigation course, and finished that up, knowing that I'd probably get called to go on a F-16 crash or two. And sure enough, you're in your squadron, feeling good about yourself. Next thing you know, the phone rings and you're off to a crash investigation. So that's kind of where my crash investigation background came about. Ended up doing 2 mid-air collisions, 2 engine failures, and also a helicopter crash. And a couple of other interim boards with engine failures in the F-16. Yeah, all Viper. Yeah, all Viper stuff. And so I got kind of my foot in the door for crash investigation with that background. Meanwhile, I'm still flying the F-16, trying to stay qualified to do the job I'm trained to do. And so you get those little interruptions where you go away from home for about a month to do a crash investigation. And then after I separated from the Air Force, I retired from the Air Force in 2004. I had a captain I was flying with. His dad was killed in an F-111 crash, a training accident in February of 1969. So just before that flying magazine came out that I showed you at the start, his dad was on a training mission with another guy doing a low-level terrain following. You know, the F-111 had terrain following at that time, and they hit a mountain. The guy, like I said, the captain I was flying with at the time said, hey, my dad was killed right down there. We're flying over the crash site. And he goes, hey, we're going up there in a couple of months. Why don't you come with me? And I said, hey, I got some crash investigation background. Yeah, I'll go up there and see it and take a look. Well, it's up there about 10,000 feet up on the top of this mountain in just near Wendover, Utah.
Okay.
Between Elko and Wendover, Utah, on it's called the Pequot Range. And he thought it crashed on the eastern side of the mountain, when in fact, once we got there, we figured it crashed on the western side. And I said, hey, you know, there's big chunks of the airplane there. You could clearly see pieces of the wings, the engines, the cockpit was, you know, cracked open like an egg. But the plane's wreckage, you could see that it did not just plow straight into the ground like they thought was a train falling radar mishap. So what I did was I spent the next 3 years researching for him and the families as to why that airplane crashed. So I ended up writing this great big huge report. It's about 150 pages long on why the plane crashed. So just kind of replicated what an Air Force crash volume would look like and handed it to him. But it took me about 3 years because I'm still doing work on the side.
They're paying you to do something else.
Yeah. Tracking down people, traveling places to talk to and interview people, trying to get research, phone calls, emails. It just kept going and going and going. But no kidding, I worked on it almost every day for 3 years. And finally, like a domino set, you set up the dominoes, push one, and you get to the conclusion and you find the answer. So what was neat about it was while I'm writing that crash report, I make a decision. I'm going to write a book, basically the journey from the F-111 to the F-14. Because you can't talk about the F-14 without talking about the F-111 and vice versa.
No, really.
And in there, you have the F-111B.
I see,
so what we ended up doing, or I ended up doing, was one of the guys I was getting information from, we wrote another book. I don't know if you can see it.
There it is, yeah.
Called 111 Down. And it chronicles every single F-111 crash, including the Navy F-111Bs, all the Aussie crashes, and all the combat losses. So it's all in there.
Wow.
Before I started writing that book, I wanted to write a book, like I said, the journey from the TFX tactical flight experimental, the F-111 to the F-14. And this buddy that and I'm co-authoring the book with me, he goes, Lou, we got to write this book. No, I'm not. No, go away. Don't bug me. And about the third try, so we finally go, okay, let's write this book. So I put what I'm working on now aside back in, was it 2007, I think it was. Wow. And we wrote that book. And now I'm just now getting back to trying to write what I was originally on. Well, again, like I was saying, you can't talk about the F-111 or the F-14 without, the two intertwining. The stories intertwine so well. Yeah. So I go, hey, to talk about the F-14 properly, I wanted to do some research and say how many F-14s crashed, and search. I finally got a number 145 crashes. And I said, okay, maybe I'll just go with that. Oh no, not me. I got to find out exactly how and where. So I started, researching the F-14, every single bureau number to figure out what happened, the disposition. So the book we're talking about right now, the Grumman F-14 Tomcat End of the Line, not the legend, is only a reference, essentially a reference chronicling every single bureau number for the U.S. Navy. And then we just don't know what happened with the Iranian Tomcats, so unfortunately. But we'll talk about that later, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So getting back to your point, I guess, to answer the question, the haunting crashes. When you look at every single one, every single airplane individually, some there's just no information about. They finished their careers, went off to someplace, a museum, or to a mark or a Sardip yard, and were scrapped. Unfortunately, they're gone forever. But now you start looking at the individual crashes where there's a little bit of information, and you can start to build that picture again, the dominoes. And eventually you get to the end of the line of what happened to the last F-14.
Yeah. And
to see some go to museums and to research those, there's other parts of F-14s out there, maybe waiting to be restored. And there's some hidden away. There's some gems out there. And it was just really neat through different people. And I wouldn't mind if I could just acknowledge a couple of people. Everybody's heard of Mark Wolf's Where Have All the Tomcats Gone? So that was kind of a starting point. He has an excellent website that chronicles a lot of this stuff. And I really appreciate Mark Wolf. He gave me some extra stuff to help me out. And then I ran in on Facebook a guy named Dan Tecker. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan. He also does lithographs, artistic lithographs of all the F-14s. Any squadron, any airplane you want, he can make you a lithograph. And so I'd like to thank him because he provided a tremendous amount of information that could fill in some of the blanks. Because, like I said, you go out there and start digging. You run to a dead end. It's a dead end. There's no information out there. Nobody knows because nobody's told that story. So you just have to go. Some of the planes in this thing just have a bureau number and scrapped. That's all you airplane. But every airplane,
especially the earlier back it was, right? The longer ago, the less paper trail. First of all, because of how long it's been since then.
Yeah.
There was less of a paper trail back then.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I think in the intro too, the story just there's just no information, and it's unfortunate because every plane has a story. And moving on to guys like Bill Bartow, you guys probably know Bill. Yep. Contributor awesome. Not only on Facebook but to other aides. He's called me. He's talked to me, going, "Hey, this is what's wrong with the book, and we'll fix that in the next revision." So Bill was kind of a big help to kind of point me in a direction too. But I also like to point out Roberto Rue. I don't know if you've seen him on Facebook. He's researching every single Tomcat's history that's in a museum. Oh. And an amazing guy. I mean, he is the #1 Tomcat fan, I think, in the world. I mean, he's just a great guy to get information about, and you can find him on Facebook. And then the last guy, my first version of End of the Line was kind of like the first Tomcat crash. Here's the brand new airplane, leading edge design, 4th gen airplane, and it just crashed because of Lysa hydraulics. Well, my first version of the book had some mistakes on it just because of the layout. And, so I kind of consider my -1 version of the book crashed.
Oh, yeah.
So went back and I met this guy named Brian Green, who was a F-14 plane captain and also an LPO, I guess a line supervisor as a maintenance guy. And that man is an amazing individual in that he can sit there and look at all the numbers and make it correct. So kind of overcoming my dyslexia with the numbers, he kind of helped me arrange things a little bit better. So I think the -2 version of the book is much, much better. But again, I just want to reference that it's not a read book. It's just a reference book. In fact, it has, like you've seen, SYHYN, it has plain white pages in there. You can just take a pencil or pen and mark in there whatever you want. So
it is pretty neat. Like I said, it's not a page turner per se.
No, yeah.
There's no story, but I mean, there's a massive story, but there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no connecting verbiage to it. It really is a reference, and I love that about it. Actually, that's the same thing that Lorenzo told me, was that it's because I'm a data-driven guy myself. I would love it. So appreciate it.
It's a go-to book in the sense that if you want to know who was the last person that died in an F-14 Tomcat in a crash, if you want to know who the first person was, if you if you want to know where your airframe is today, if you want to know, I've called it, and I've said it the other night talking to you about it. I said that it's kind of like the Holy Grail Tomcat Bible in the sense that it has the need to know information in the Tomcat. It's not here I was, ripping over Yuma. We had, 2 F-16s closing on us. We were at 20,000 feet in a section, and Bio did an awesome job of that in Top Gun Rio, and that's where I'm kind of pulling that out of right there. But, again, this is when you need to know. This is when, your dad flew Tomcats, your uncle flew Tomcats, or something, you have a BU number you worked on when you were in the Navy. And, Lou's homework on this book this is nothing you possibly threw together. This is years of research, honestly.
Well, and that's the thing I wanted to hit on, actually, was that thank you for telling us those guys that you collaborated with on, and were very helpful in the production.
Thank you. Awesome.
So Lorenzo, you got the name jotted down. We're going to have him on the show, right?
Thanks, Lou. We'll talk to you later.
See you later. We're done with you. Yeah, I get it. No, it's a long journey, and like I said, you can't crank this out in a weekend. I mean, it literally was probably 2 years of hard labor. I worked on this book probably every day, sometimes all weekend, because you're trying to dig, call people, email people, get books, buy books, travel places, and gather information to kind of fill in the blanks. And if you didn't know, trying to find someone that did. And there's another problem is a lot of guys have information. They don't want to give it up. It's my secret. I'm going to hold on to this thing. And I understand maybe they want to write their own book, and that's great. But there's information out there that people have. And for that reason, I left my email in the book, in the back of the book. Hey, if you have something you want in there, I can do revisions maybe once a year. It's and just add in little anecdotes or what really happened. Because
I think it's a nice thing to have because honestly, it's a fascinating story to me.
Yeah,
the way the Tomcat came into existence was the top of the heap for a good 20 years, and then redefined itself for its last 15 years, basically, and became the top of the heap for that. I just think I think it's really fascinating to know how, for all those of us who've had a part of that story, how your piece of that story fits in with it. And so, for example, I've got some stuff written in my logbook. Like, for example, this Buno did this with me, or whatever, that kind of thing. I'm gonna, when I get home, I don't have my logbook with me now, but when I get home, I'm gonna send you some of that stuff because I think, I think it's really, really valuable to kind of pull that together into a combined story. And I appreciate you for doing it.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And like for me, 164603 on its last air show, I have written down that when the Rio got out and came into VIP, he was having fruit salad on a plate, and the guy driving up front was having, I think it was sloppy Joe mix. I got a logbook going too.
Who was that loser? Man, I don't know. Dude.
Fruit salad, yummy, yummy. That's all I ever think about every time I hear that song. Is
There it is.
some warrior flying a super Tomcat after he just landed at the air show.
Hey, I'm gonna have fruit salad because it's good, right?
That's how I eat it.
So Balls, let me ask you.
Yes.
I'm sure some pieces of data in there, when you came across them, just were, I don't know, maybe dumbfounding, but they were certainly surprising to you.
Yes.
So I was hoping you maybe could highlight some of those for us. Some of the things that, like, you were like, I would not have guessed that, or maybe just no way, one of those kind of things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I wrote down a couple of bureau numbers, and we could talk about them. And it goes in with that. Yeah.
Too, so yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you can't just go online and find the names of the people that perished. And I'll take an aside with a lot of respect and reverence to those guys that died, and the one lady. It's heart-wrenching. I mean, if you're not taken aback by how close it came to them surviving, it's just a number, it's just a name, but it's not to me. Mm-hmm. But to get those names, my brother lives down there in Pensacola, and I knew there was a F-14 memorial or monument to the guys that perished. And there's one in downtown Oceana, and there's one there at the Pensacola Air Museum, and you can see the names for yourself. Mm-hmm. So my brother took the picture of that, and from that, I can now use that also as a data point for finding the actual bureau numbers for the planes that crashed. So you can kind of fill in those blanks. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more airplanes that crashed than that. I think I eventually came up with not 145, but 153. Okay. And the way I had to lay it out, it just kind of went with crashed. Some were given the title written off. I really didn't understand that. I think I went scrap surplus for planes that are still in existence, but probably beyond repair to display. Mm-hmm. And I chronicled those as well. And then there's others, where I think it was, five Tomcats rolled off the deck of a carrier. Yeah. Tragic.
Right.
You didn't get it chained down. The ship, heeled over.
Heeled, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a wet deck, and there she goes.
Yep.
You just go, what a tragic loss.
Yeah, especially when that's, if you're on deployment, they're not replacing that aircraft.
Yeah.
Certain. I mean, the loss of the aircraft is significant, and they're not cheap. And
no.
Especially later in our history, we couldn't replace them. Not possible to replace them.
Right.
But yeah, even the squadron be like, well, I guess we only have 11 now. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a huge loss to a squadron, because there's the poor plane captain that's responsible for that plane's going, now, there's my plane. Anyway, as you dig through this stuff, you just find anomalies, essentially in crashes that are like, wow. Okay, I'll point out one. I got about 5 bureau numbers written down here, and you cut me off, but there was one bureau number 159440, and a guy named Lieutenant Timothy Matheny was either ejected without him pulling the handle, or he ejected in flight out over the ocean. It was on a Top Gun mission. He's the Rio, and the canopy comes off. He's out of the plane, and the pilot, I don't know the pilot's name, but he was able to recover the plane back to Miramar, where it was rebuilt, put the new ejection seat into the canopy on it. Okay. And unfortunately, that plane went out, had hydraulic failure on a night low level, and the plane crashed and killed 2 guys. So one airplane is 3 fatalities.
Wow.
That happened. Okay. Yeah. You don't find that stuff, and you really, really dig in. And then there was another one.
You remember what time frame was that?
Yeah.
Was they pretty close to each other?
Well, the other one, Metheny was I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was like a month apart.
Oh wow, that's the true Christine right there.
Actually, that's another one here, but I can't remember the time difference between Metheny was in '86, I believe, and the other one went down at some other time. But those two guys were killed. So 160887, you can look on one side of the page with Metheny and go almost straight across, and it shows the two other guys were killed in I don't know, a systems failure, or it was hydraulic failure.
Oh yeah,
talked about, but they ended up flying into the ground. They didn't eject.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, I don't know if you ever had this when you were flying, but when you have a mechanical failure, there is an aspect. I mean, I'm not even the guy in flight control, and we, like, when we had an engine out, I still had this feeling like, I mean, obviously the D model, we had a lot more thrust available. Engine. But I still felt like, I don't want to let this jet go, and I don't want to give up on it.
No.
We can save this. I'm sure we can. And
that's the pilot mentality, is you want to stay there till the last minute. And unfortunately, some of the ejections were out of the envelope because they stayed too long.
Yeah.
So those are the hard parts to swallow when people die because they stayed with the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Metheny was in 1979, and the other one was in 1992. So the plane actually crashed, and two guys were killed in that same airplane.
Wow.
And then I'll move on to one more. It was 159846, sitting on the carrier deck, and both pilots weren't strapped in, and the seats fired on the carrier deck, and they were killed. Yeah, unfortunately.
Wow. But the jet was fine.
The jet was fine. It just, for some reason, both seats fired on the carrier deck. Neither guy was strapped in, but they're in the seat, but they weren't strapped in.
Yeah.
And, you can understand the results from that. And then 1 month later, they put new seats in it, and canopy, obviously, and it crashed due to fuel starvation. Same airplane.
Whoa.
So little things like that you kind of pick through. You have to look at the numbers, but things just start to crop up like that.
Yeah, I heard a story. I heard a story with the Ghost Riders that they had a jet that slid off the side, like you were talking about, nose over the edge, and it was hanging there, and they were able to get a chain on it, but it was hanging, and the aircrew didn't know really what they should do. Should they just get out? Should they not? They were discussing it on the intercom, and the last agreement was that we'll stay in, we'll open the canopy, and we'll climb out. So they opened the canopy, and the back seater got unstrapped in the seat, and for whatever reason, the jet moved, nudged or whatever, and hit a wave, and it, just slid on the deck a little bit, and the pilot punched him out, and the back seater was standing in the seat.
Yeah. Okay.
And the seat fired. So that, makes me wonder if that's got to be in your book, I'm sure. And again, with that, the BU number will be old, 158, 159, because it was a late 70s accident. Yeah, Tom talks about that in the Ghost Riders.
159440 was that?
Yes.
Yeah, Rio was killed. He wasn't strapped in. The pilot was. Yeah, exactly.
Sad.
And then, just a couple more.
Before you do that 159846, the one where they both were ejected.
Yep.
And it crashed on fuel starvation, I noticed.
Yep.
Lorenzo, you'll be happy to hear this. They both lived. Both successfully ejected, and the back seater was Lieutenant Commander Lorenzo. So there you go.
There we go. See, I knew I'd make my way in there. But yeah,
the book.
As you both know, as air crews, you do everything to save the airplane, especially if you're in a populated area. And getting out becomes not an option, and makes me think of the crew at Willow Grove, and that plane. That wing lost lift, and that plane departed hard, and they knew, you got to get out of here right now. And they looked down and saw a neighborhood underneath them, and that became not the first option. Getting out of the airplane came the second option. The first option was to avoid the housing, and you lose the envelope in that situation, and it's
not enough altitude to recover. Yeah,
and it's important that things like that are captured in your book and stuff, so that it's a great resource to have. If you're looking for relevant data, that the homework has been done on it, it's a second to none book, really. I mean, I live by books, and if you want to know how fast the Tomcat goes, well, that's the performance manual. I will talk to you all day long on how fast the Tomcat goes, at what altitude, what drag, what's hanging on it, what's, you want to talk flight control designs? I got flight control designs. Let's talk Tomcat and what makes the flight control system so uniquely different than any other airplane. And that's why someone like me, writing for the page and everything that I do, researching in history and reading, I read more than the average human. It's abnormal. But his book to me was something that, like, how did I get this far without it? Literally, because I'd have to source all over the place to find the detail that I need, the names, the date, the BU number, and I've gone to different lengths where I'll pull out a cruise video, and at the end of every cruise video, sadly, they write the names of the guys that didn't come home. And
that was a bit of not a tradition, but that was unfortunate necessity for a long period of the Tomcats history. Now, by the time I was flying, it wasn't the case.
It was much safer.
Having that in there and having those memorials, I mean, it was the least you could do, right?
Yeah. It goes on, and unfortunately, I kind of chronicle that as, hey, it's an honor to represent those names near the front of the book because that's important. But to kind of go into the crashes and see why. And it's basically, I would call it standard in relation to fighter ops, the high tempo of your operations on a carrier, on a deployment, practicing for combat. You see mid-air collisions, guys hitting the ground. They just didn't pull out in time, or they're lost at sea. I mean, I learned that term from Brian Greene they say lost at sea, not crashed into the ocean. It's just one of those things where you have to come to grips that a plane launched off the carrier never came back, and they really don't know why it crashed. So again, it's kind of that haunting aspect that, oh my gosh, how do you finish this story?
Yeah.
And you just have to kind of, okay, lost at sea.
153, you said 152?
Yes, 153. And in there, there might be other numbers. Someone might know the exact numbers of exactly how many are out there. A Grumman tech rep, somebody knows.
Did you catch?
Grumman gets to know the numbers from the Navy, and the Navy knows. Someone out there has those information, but that's basically the closest I could get was about 153 completely destroyed airplanes. And then there were several that are listed as write-offs, hard landing or something like that. It won't be economical.
Yeah. The word write-off becomes interesting because at Grumman Calveron, it can be as simple as they lost a brand new jet, landed on the runway, and, skid off, and, that would be that. I've seen that where it 180'd out into the dirt and it was into the mud because it was spring, and it sunk when it went off the runway. I mean, it was, but there was also one that was damaged on a cross country. They brand new, sent out of Calverton to Miramar, lands at Miramar, and I believe the next morning the VF-124 fired the jet up, and someone took it out, and whatever happened on takeoff, they lost center alignment on the runway and skidded off the runway and hit the runway arresting gear machine. There was some sort of equipment on the side of the runway at Miramar that it ended up hitting, and a brand new Tomcat was instant garbage. They parted it out, and that was that.
I might have listed that one as a write-off because it sounds like a crash, but they really didn't get airborne. So there's a fine line between crash and write-off. Crash destroyed in a crash, flight related, or is it a ground accident? I don't know, but it is in the book.
We talked on the Christmas show about Leekster had mentioned that I was telling you about how we have the Diamondback nose section F-14B cockpit at the cradle, and they had a fire on taxi, holding on the runway, whatever, and that jet burned up, and they took two jets and made one jet out of it, and they made a joke about a Frankenstein, literally in the squadron, and that's how we ended up with the cockpit. So just curious, just throwing it out there, How would you pick the BU number to this airplane? Would you go by the cockpit section, which has the BU tag, or would you go by the aft section, which has it painted on the engine nacelle door? Which one are we going with that we just melded two together? Or are we pulling the calculator out and
Yeah, that's based on Grumman that rebuilt it probably. They probably go with the main airframe, the fuselage bureau number, not the cockpit. So I don't know. I don't know what
I'm only saying that because the data tag is in the front cockpit,
right,
telling you the BU number, the date, the contract, all the
Yeah.
information on the
Now,
jet.
the BUNO itself, I mean, I'm getting into stuff I'm a little bit on my depth on, but the BUNO is simply a naval number, meaning that's
Yes, the
number
assignment.
the Navy gave it, what was assigned when it was accepted.
Yeah,
And so, if Grumman's going to reproduce it, they're gonna basically say, "Here's your new aircraft. However, it's part of this." And so they probably, I would imagine, they probably stuck with the thing that had the wing box on it, because that's the thing that.
yeah, that's the
The
main.
hard, yeah.
Right.
And also, Lou,
Yes.
the time you've put into both, with the F-14 and stuff like that, with the years of research, and it's an off-the-wall question. You could answer it honestly. You've been through the F-16 community in and out, every which way but loose. So I'm just curious, safety factors.
Yes.
Do you find the Tomcat to be more of a higher accident rate than normal, or do you find its environment it operates in to be a part of that attrition rate, we'll say, where it's not fair to say it doesn't just have a runway when it has a hydraulic failure to just,
Right.
they have to work with it over the water, and if it's not good enough to come aboard, they have to actually get out of the airplane. It's not an option.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I sat around and went through all the numbers. So in the back of the book, I list. So every bureau number is in the book at least 3 times. So in the main body is line by line in the sequential order of production. After that, I go into charts, or I guess it would be an Excel file type table, where it's by date of occurrence, first to last. And then I repeat it by just reshuffling it into bureau number order. And I've seen a couple guys on Facebook comment, I just go straight to the back and look at my bureau number, and I can figure out why it crashed. And everything is, like I said, just a 1, maybe 2 liner for each airframe. Yeah. Now on that line, the difference between most fighters, like Air Force fighters, and the Tomcat had in there carrier ops. So, I went through and looked at, basically there were 31 operational losses of Tomcats due to just carrier ops. Mm-hmm. Now that would be cold cat shots.
Yeah, sure.
Ramp strikes.
Yeah.
There's the one that the guys in the middle of the book, Wookie Rucker, where they landed, the cable didn't break, his hook didn't break, but he said that the portion of the cable that goes inside the ship.
Yes.
And basically it'd be, in a layman's terms, the inertia reel, that broke. And so they go zinging off the end of the deck, and they eject in both, a successful ejection. So, things like that, or several Tomcats were destroyed on the deck because someone bolted and collided with the planes on the front, the bow.
Up on the bow.
On the bow. Yeah. So
these would be the things that, like, if the aircraft was fine, there's nothing wrong with the aircraft, there's nothing wrong with what the air crew did, it would have been fine if it had been on a land field. So you're talking nearly 20 or more than 20% of those losses were due to basically CV ops.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So about 31, and that's a rough guess. I just kind of had to weave in engine failures versus loss of control, because some of the loss of controls were related to the A model, when the compressor stall and the plane do a hard yaw or an asymmetric roll and go out of control, and the guys would lose it. So now you look at engine failures, there's 32. That's the highest loss rate of the Tomcats, just a pure engine failure, engine fire, that kind of thing. And then loss of control was about third to carrier ops, 30. So carrier ops, 31 losses. Loss of control was 30. But again, you could kind of meld in there. Some of them were due to probably the early A models with the compressor stalls and things like that, like they showed on Top Gun. I don't want to bring in the Top Gun story, sure. But it's just
we got a reference every game, every time.
You look at any.
That's going to cost you $2.
Any fighter aircraft has those type of stories.
Yeah, sure.
Think about the F-111. Usually, if they had an engine fire, it went into both engines, or the whole plane would go out of control pretty quickly because of the engine fire. I talked about in that book 111 Down in detail how it happened. Well, the Tomcat too. I mean, I chronicled 3 Tomcats were flying along and just exploded. And it was because they just reckoned that one engine blew up in the airplane. And
yeah, I know. I actually know one of the guys with one of my flight instructors that happened to. I've heard that story. Great detail. Yeah.
And SYHYN, that's why I say some of these crashes are just hunting.
Yeah.
You're flying along, you're a King Kong in a F-14, and next thing you know, you're holding a stick in your hand and there's nothing around you. It's and I'm not making fun of that. I'm saying it's tragic. It's a tragic loss. But you think about that, three Tomcats just exploded, and that's one of those tough ones in there. Mid-air collisions. When you're dogfighting and doing ACM,
fight rules. Yep.
Yeah, it's a fact of life, and now with carrier ops aside, because that's not part of the Air Force mission, and sometimes not the Marine Corps or land-based Tomcats. Now you're starting to talk about systems failures, the mid-air collisions, controlled flight in terrain, those types of things, very common. So overall, I just kind of tallied up the ejections versus the survival rate. It's very apparent that Navy pilots are extremely well prepared and trained for an ejection. You think about it, a cat shot goes cold, you're going off. You bolter the cable brakes, and you're too slow to go around, and you're going on the silk letdown. So
yeah, I mean, it's true. It's just every single flight off the carrier, there was at least one time when I was thinking, be prepared for ejection.
Yes,
every single flight off the carrier.
and you talk to guys, interview people. I've talked to a few guys that have ejected right off the bow and on a cold cat shot. And it's you're not airborne until you're airborne. It's one of those things. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's pretty scary. So carrier ops in there, obviously is a dangerous environment, very dangerous environment. And it's not the F-14 per se. I'm sure the F-18, the A-4, A-7, all those planes had a similar accident rate for the Navy. So overall, you look at the F-14 accident rate, and it's about average, but the survival rate for ejections is extremely high, about 72% successful ejections. That's good.
Compliment to Martin Baker.
Yeah, Martin Baker. There you go. Martin Baker's a phenomenal seat.
GRU-7.
But you also look at guys are prepared to eject, and they don't hesitate, which is great.
Yeah.
But you look at the bios. I try to get the ejections. Some of them we don't know the names of the people, other than it was a successful ejection. But one guy punches, and the other guys either didn't eject or a seat failed.
Yeah.
So tough story.
And I understand that what happened since the Pandora's box was open. I'm going to go ahead and say top again. Yeah. That what happened in that ejection that they depicted in the movie actually happened, and that's why.
Yes, it did. Yep.
I think it was Bio said that he or someone else is the one that recommended that's the way he go, because that actually happened. That someone actually hit the canopy, which is why they designed the Nacy's seats that I flew with the little bat ears on them, so they go through the canopy.
You go through the canopy. Yep.
Because if you actually read the NATOPS manual, it says in that exact situation. Now, again, I understand seconds go by like minutes in that environment, so you have to keep that in mind. But you do have the canopy release jettison handle specifically for that. It says right in the book, pull that lever. Look up when the canopy has cleared the wind stream. Go ahead and eject. Yeah. Who the hell could think of that in that moment? Like what he's talking about. And, it's the same. It's like if you had a car accident, you've heard the bang, how loud it is. So when Balls mentions an air-to-air collision, could you just imagine the sound, the metal collision, You know, and you're supposed to sit there and think of the detail in your ejection, not just your plane's on fire, tumbling out of the sky. I just need to get the hell out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well, and of course, all those NATOPS TCL boldface items are written in blood.
Yes.
It probably wasn't written before it actually happened.
Yep.
True.
Yep. Changes to the airplane as well are written in blood, you know, and it's unfortunate, but, you know, like I said, it's a dangerous environment, flying tactical aircraft, fighters, attack aircraft, whatever. You're exposed to the ground, you're exposed to ground fire, enemy air to air. You know, you're going into combat and it's a deadly mission.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing about the Tomcat is it prevailed.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and we'll get into it maybe when we get to the Iranian Tomcats at some point, if you invite me back.
Let's plan on it.
You know, it's
That's going to be an awesome
where,
show.
where you look at just some of the crashes, and there was one other one I talked about. It was a great segue about the mid-air collisions. There was a Tomcat flying down there in Corpus Christi, and it had the mid-air collision with a T-34.
Oh,
yeah,
I remember that. What? Ooh.
Yeah.
What's that?
So that was 160664.
Okay.
I had a mid-air collision with the T-34, and this is the bad part, the haunting part. The Tomcats stayed together, and the T-34 was wrapped around the right wing of the aircraft and was able to land with the T-34 there. Unfortunately, the two pilots in the T-34 were fatalities. That airplane, 160664, they removed the wings on it and took it up to China Lake. So it's up there. It's still at China Lake today.
Is that one of the hulks they use for moving stuff or for practicing moving stuff around?
Yeah, they use them to as targets, just to shoot lasers at them. They use it. What's it? The weapons lab. They call it China Lake Weapons Lab, and in the storage area there. And they use them for different tests. Put them on the ranges. I mean, they do all kinds of stuff. They heat them up, shoot stingers at them.
Oh yeah.
So at least one I know for sure was destroyed there at China Lake, a Tomcat. They just superheated it and fired a stinger at it. And the guy told me it was pretty beat up.
Yeah, I can imagine. I notice there's a string there on that page of VF-111, VF-111, VF-1. Do you? I don't want to. I don't want to disparage the Aardvark. That's the Aardvarks, right? They were gone.
That's Sundowners.
Sundowners.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But was there a squadron that you tabulated had the most number of losses?
You know, I did not do that. That's one
213.
I did look at.
Was it?
Yeah. You'd have to look at because I do list the squadrons with the crash. That's the only place I make note of that. Is the squadrons changed. The planes moved from squadron to squadron, and then the Modex numbers may have changed. So, you know, I really do. I understand and appreciate where the Tomcats were. The people loved them, and they worked hard on them. The mechanics, the maintenance guys, the armament guys, everybody worked hard to keep those airplanes flying. And nothing but my hats off to those men, women that did that to keep that airplane running. They had to work hard. And it was a maintenance intensive airplane, but they got them ready to go and they flew awesome missions for the Navy. It was a great airplane. It really was. But you realize too that you can't fix everything. And little systems problems would crop up. Hydraulic failures, flight control failures, caused the loss of several airplanes. I think I showed about 23 Tomcats were lost just due systems failures. That's not bad maintenance. That's just things go bad. Things break in flight.
About, you know, if you look, if we're discounting the 79 or 80 jets that Iran, well, I guess one of them wasn't actually ever flown by Iran, but of that, discounting those jets, looks like about roughly just right around 1/4 of them crashed. Of our Tomcats basically crashed.
Yeah. And that's all that we really know about. It'd be nice to know, but I don't think we're going to see the true numbers. But the only estimate I made was there's probably only 30 Iranian Tomcats that are still airworthy. Now I watched one video. It's a great documentary. It's in the back of the book. There is one of the sources that, actually in the Iranian Tomcats book I wrote, talks about Iran says they have 41 active or flyable Tomcats. And I kind of refuted that. Even if you go, they've lost one a year for the 46 years they had it. Now you're down to 33 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just, I don't want to get into it. I trust the Iranians. Maybe they got 41, but they're not all flying. So
Right.
that's kind of, like I said, you have to drive a stake in the ground and go, okay, that's what you say.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to believe it. But we'll know the numbers someday.
Someday. So for our numbers of the roughly 2 or 3/4 of them that didn't crash,
yeah.
Any of those stories that stuck out to you that were kind of more of like a real amazing success story or something like that, something that says like, hey, this is kind of a neat story,
a milestone.
Yeah, something like that, maybe.
I think I chronicled one in there that was the longest serving, flew the most hours Tomcat. I can't remember where it is. It's like a 159 number, I think. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. I put it in bold.
Are we talking about
this was the longest serving Tomcat, and I believe it might have been one like a Block 60 or something like that, somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact bureau number on that one, but it's in there. And then,
Lorenzo? Is that what is?
I'm thinking the VF-84 Jolly Roger over at Pennsylvania's Lodge, VFW Lodge. I think that was that, and they're the ones in museums anyway, and then the one in New Jersey.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, 159600 is the longest serving F-14 Tomcat in the U.S. Navy. And it's now on display at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum.
Oh, Christine, you've flown that jet. Yeah, it is Christine.
Yes,
that's by 2006, but the oldest Tomcat we saved on display, I guess, is what I'm referencing. Yeah,
sure. It was there's a couple of the RTD&E versions that are in storage, and then also I think there's one I say, man, if this thing's in storage, it needs to be saved because it's one of the. I think it's the one that did all the spin tests. Where it had the fins.
Oh, the black canards on the nose. That's 157991.
And it's pushed off into the forest down there at Pumpkin Neck.
In Dahlgren, Virginia. That jet.
Yeah, Dahlgren, Virginia. I mean, it's little things like that you find out, and I just by people telling me, hey, look at this one. I think it was Mark Wolf. Or Dan Tecker go, hey, look at these things. There's other airplanes out there, and you've mentioned some too, Lorenzo, that there's other Tomcats out there. Maybe, who knows? And I if I couldn't find them, I just put it down. It's been scrapped. Yeah,
sure, absolutely. All of speaking about Tomcats, balls, it makes me have to ask you: any DACT ever against a Tomcat flying that F-16 of yours?
Oh yeah,
good question. That's a good
Twice we did it, an intercept, a long range intercept against the guys, and they must have had broken radars or something. When we came in, we're a 4-ship wall, and I picked one up visually at like 30 miles. Got him in my a radar lock on the guy, and I could see the Tomcat at 30 miles.
Oh yeah.
So I just pulled my radar right to the far left of the scope. So I'm just barely keeping him on my radar scope. Didn't lock him up, so he's not getting any raw that I'm there, and pulled in and came in behind him, and they're just like, we never saw you.
Oh, you did.
Wild.
Full on version, huh?
And our radar in the F-16, even the training mode, had its own ECM jamming. So if the AWG-9 was on, it was jamming against them. They may not have seen us. I don't know. We didn't debrief with the guys other than telephonically. And
so
then
I don't know if you knew in my time frame, I don't know when it started, but sometime before me, the T-39s that I flew in flight school had F-16 radars in them, actually.
Yeah.
So we actually trained with F-16 radars before we went to go flying OG-9s or ATGs.
Sure.
That's wild.
Yeah. So I'm actually kind of familiar with your radar, actually.
Yeah. They're out there. They've scaled them up and scaled them down. It was a great radar.
Yes, definitely detuned for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But at the time, you kind of give the Tomcat guys grace that at the time the AWG-9 came out, it was leading edge. I mean, it was a planar air radar that with the system tracked 24 targets at a time, and that was unbelievable. That's an F4 could only track one and fire on one and track that AIM-7 to it. You had one missile.
Yeah,
that's it. The Tomcat in track-wall scan could fire 6 missiles and guide all 6 at one time. Amazing. And if the Phoenix went active, you could snip it and run away.
Yep.
And let the missile do the job. And just, that's why back in the 70s, the Tomcat, I call it the Mystique, was unbelievable. It just blew people's mind.
Yeah. Well, so you're mentioning this. There was a second time when you did some DACT.
Yeah. In that one, we met over the Yuma range. They came out of, I believe, Miramar. And they said, they're showing up going, hey, we're limited to 4.5 Gs because of a structural restriction, I believe, at the time. So, they're aging. So this is probably just before they retired, probably 2000 or so. But they said they were restricted to 4.5 Gs.
They might have had a red stripe on the fleet or something like that, because we were nearly full up.
Yeah.
No.
So it's no match for an F-16, unfortunately. I was looking forward to tangling with the guys, but they're restricted. So you just pass at the merge, do a high spec pass, and reset for another intercept. And it was more training for them. We're more adversaries for them. Wasn't supposed to go out there and beat them up. Just give a presentation and let them do it.
Okay, gotcha. So these are fleet squadrons you were going against.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't do it. Fly a Top Gun and be a dissimilar asset for the Tomcat. I know the Navy had the F-16N for a long time. I don't know what their restrictions would be, but those jets were bent pretty good. So I know they were doing 9+ Gs.
Yep.
And against the Tomcat. And how it performed, a good Tomcat pilot might be able to get inside an F-16 that's slow because we had the limiter. You couldn't pull any more Gs. You couldn't tighten the turn anymore because the limiter just wouldn't let you do it.
Yeah. Basically, so you're a member of that crew. The computer was telling you no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you think, man, it'd be nice if I could get this nose to rate around on this guy, but you just can't. The plane says, if you go any further, you're going out of control. So I don't know, on a full up 1v1 with a Tomcat, I think the F-16 would prevail, especially with the GE motor, maybe not the Pratt & Whitney motor, but and that's nothing against the Tomcat. The Tomcat at the time was designed to win the dogfight, first with the gun, back its way out with the AIM-9, back its way out to the AIM-7, and back its way out long-range BVR with the Phoenix missile. That's the way it was designed to win the dogfight, because we were losing kind of the dogfights in Vietnam. And how are you going to gain air superiority if, one, you can't detect the target, and two, you can't kill it, can't outturn those little MiGs. We're getting spanked. So that's where the Tomcat ruled. Yeah. You've seen the videos of a guy doing an air show. The wings are fully spread or swept back, and that thing can turn like incredible.
Which is, honestly, when you compare it to aircraft of its size and weight,
gosh,
it needed to be able to get that amount of radar up in the air.
Yes, absolutely.
There was no way to do it in a lighter configuration back in those days, and so to be able to put that all airborne and be able to turn like it did, it really was an incredible piece of engineering. And the swing system was complicated, but necessary.
It's an amazing airplane. It really did blow people's minds, because like the F4 Phantom doing an air show, and he has a 10,000 foot loop or an 8,000 foot loop, and the Tomcat is probably a 3,000 foot loop. It was incredible to watch that. But you go back to the F-111B built by Grumman there at Calveron, and it was only designed as a missile platform for the Phoenix missile. It wasn't designed to dogfight. So people say the F-111B was a dog. Well, yeah, it was. It wasn't designed for the dogfight, because at the time it was designed, they thought the missile's going to do the job. We don't need to go tangle it up with a MiG. We don't want to get into a dogfight. That's dangerous. And it was. But when you shave off the side-by-side cockpit, take away the bomb bay, reduce the fuel load, put all the weapons on either the wing glove or the tunnel, where your roll rate's not going to be affected by the inertia, It's an amazing aircraft. It had, I think, the same internal fuel as an F-111, minus about 1,000 pounds. Overall, was 24,000 pounds lighter than an F-111.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's obvious the Tomcat was designed to win a dogfight.
Yeah.
Big difference in the steel wing box and the titanium wing box in weight. It's a massive difference. Really was.
Yeah, and that'll be something I talk about too in this other book, is that titanium wing box came from where? Boeing. And remember in the TFX, you may not know, the TFX controversy, it came down to when they were going for the TFX, Boeing and General Dynamics that made the F-111 eventually competed against each other. Boeing's design won 4 times the competition. And Boeing in theirs had a welded steel titanium wing box, just like the Tomcat, with the double pivot points on each side of the wing box, just like the Tomcat did with the bearing on each of those. So if one of the bearings broke or one of the holding points broke, the wing would not come off and you'd lose the airplane. So, and those welded wing boxes were put together with a gas chamber. I forget what they call it, but it's a sealed gas chamber.
I could fill you in on that. It was actually the raw titanium was shipped to Lawrence Aviation in Port Jefferson, New York, and they forged it down to usable size parts. They mill it down, send it to Grumman and Bethpage, where Grumman sets it all up on a jig, brings it into a vacuum chamber, remove all the air out of the chamber. It's in a space vacuum. And they're welding in that. And the idea of it is when you weld titanium and the titanium gets hot, it becomes brittle and just breaks. But if you weld it in a vacuum, it doesn't get hot. And it welds cold in a sense, and it retains its strength. So I didn't know that it was taken from another program, though. That's awesome to learn that.
Well, the other thing is, too, those vacuum chambers that went to Grumman came from Boeing.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they were getting ready to weld those wing boxes for the with the TFX. It would still have been the F-111, and also the SST, the supersonic transport plane, was going to have a welded beam, variable geometry, or welded wing box, and variable geometry. Same. So Grumman got all that stuff, and also you look at the Tomcat. There was no weapons. There's no swiveling pylons like the F-111 on the F-14. They put the weapons on the wing box, or on the what do they call it?
Glove.
The wing glove. Yeah. Okay. Well, guess what Boeing had done with their version? They had 4 missiles in a bomb bay in the fuselage. 4 Phoenix missiles could fit in the bomb bay of the Boeing plane, and then 2 were semi-submerged on the wing glove. So, it's just what I'm going to go through in this book is step through the things that Grumman, General Dynamics, Boeing, influenced the design of the F-14. I mean, the F-14 was well done by Grumman. I'm telling you, it's a great airplane. But when they were involved in the F-111B program, they were listening and looking, and they started their own program to develop the F-14 long before the F-111 was canceled for them. Yeah, absolutely.
Balls, I got to thank you. It's an incredible book. We've absolutely learned a lot from it. So now the big question is where do we find this book? Where is it available to the public? Where can they get their hands on it? And
Amazon. Amazon. It's printed by KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. Don't be afraid of that. It's you just go on Amazon, type in the title or my name, and I think right now it's around $11 because that covers printing cost, and then you'd have to pay shipping on top of that. And
I think he's sharing your screen here, sharing the picture for you. I think there it is.
Yeah, there you go. So, it's got that nice glossy cover, but don't be overwhelmed or underwhelmed. It's inside. It's just plain white paper with reams and reams of bureau numbers. But I tried to cover them all. I hope that anybody listening that buys a copy or has a copy can contact me at that email and fill me in on maybe some more details about some of those airframes. But Yeah, I spent 2 years digging through everything available. All my references are in the back of the book, and all the websites I searched, and I came up with this.
Showed your work.
Yeah, yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's awesome.
Lou, Balls, I just am so thankful that that you've made contact with us and we were able to have you on. I really appreciate this book, and so thank you for putting all your effort into it. I hope it continues to reap benefits to you and to the community as it is a resource to the community.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you so much for your gift
Yeah.
to the community, as I would call it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's just sharing information I found. And all I was trying to do was find the total number of F-14s that crashed. And rather than throwing it in a filing cabinet and hiding away, I just said, hey, I'll publish and put it out there. You can like it, you can hate it. I'm here to be a critique, and I'll try and fix it in the next revision.
I hope all of our listeners, we've got about 7 or 8 listeners, so I'm hoping they'll all. No, I'm joking.
Huge crowd! Woohoo!
I'm hoping a good number of them will show the love and give you some purchases there too.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah. All righty.
Yeah, it's an absolutely awesome book. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on. And it's just amazing. Like we ran into you, and especially the whole SR-71 part. So there's even a whole nother thing we'll catch up with you on. But yeah, we'll bring you back on for the Iranian Tomcats again, and the book that you wrote with that. And again, that's fact-filled data information that's researched just as much as our Navy version. And the work has been done. It's awesome. Can't thank you enough for your time and your effort with all of this, honestly.
It was actually a pleasure, Lorenzo. Like I said, the F-14 and the F-111 have been something that influenced me to be a fighter pilot. And no kidding, those 2 airplanes, I was fortunate to fly the F-16, but I'll tell you what, those 2 airplanes launched me in my career. And it's been a pleasure. And SYHYN and Lorenzo, absolute pleasure to talk with you guys tonight. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great Viper driver, too. So this makes it even better. And again, you guys out there, thank you very much. We appreciate everything. And it's absolutely awesome. You can catch us over on Discord at F14 Tomcat. Find us on IG, our home at F14 Tomcat. I put out a picture today. We're reaching, in the last 30 days, 2 million people. That is, you got to stop and say thank you for that, honestly. We could not do any of this without you guys. And so a big shout out to that. Thank you. And email us, f14calverton@gmail.com. And that's it, man. We appreciate everything. You guys have an awesome night. Enjoy.
Thank you.